We've seen thousands and thousands of patients with chronic fatigue. We've seen so many patients lose hope, and they do the right things and their lives came back. There's no quick fix, there's no panacea, there's no brand new medication out there. Yeah, there's some great discoveries, there's some great supplements, but if you're out there constantly researching, and you're trying this thing and that thing and this thing, and you're doing all these multiple supplements and nothing's working, and you've not tested, then you're missing the mark.
The good news is that's not genetic. There absolutely is a root cause for your fatigue. You are not just genes that are expressing this. It is not just something that you have to deal with. There's a reason for it and it's treatable.
So many doctors and practitioners are missing infections, especially viruses. Okay, if you're suffering and your general practitioner or internal medical doctor is doing the best they possibly can and you're not getting any better, we encourage you to think about these different tests. Welcome to Rethink My Health Radio Show. Each week we come live from our studios in Atlanta, Georgia, talking about healthcare matters that matter most to you, your family, your loved ones, and as I say time and time again, they matter to us, the research scientists, the practitioners, the integrative doctors in the trenches working day in, day out. We're talking about healthcare issues, chronic disease, all-time high in our country. Our healthcare system is failing us, so we're here to educate you. This show is not here to replace your medical advice. It's actually to enlighten you and to galvanize you to take action so you can make your health better from a chronic disease perspective. For the past several weeks, we've been talking about cancer. We've been talking about chronic inflammation. We've been talking about getting to the root cause, diagnostic testing. We've been talking about bridging the gap where East meets West, looking at different causes and positive solutions to make an impact on your healthcare. Right now, our country, we're spending billions and billions of dollars on research. Some of it's fantastic. Some of it was just spinning our wheels doing the same old, same old. We have to think outside the box. We have to do something different to make an impact. Today's show, we're going to be talking about a very specific condition that either you or a loved one might have experienced in the past. And it's something that a lot of traditional doctors are scratching their head with because it's so difficult to ascertain what the root cause is and what to do about it. Because some patients can get better over time with basically not doing much, and others have a debilitating time just to function on a daily basis. And we're talking about chronic fatigue syndrome. And chronic fatigue syndrome has been a term coined in our country, and we're going to talk about it from a root cause perspective. We're going to talk about it from a functional, integrative perspective. And millions of Americans are suffering with chronic fatigue syndrome. And we're going to be talking about functional medicine, integrative medicine. And as I've said time before, over the past month or so since we restarted our Rethink My Health radio show, sponsored by Progressive Medical Centers, by the way, we're so grateful for them sponsoring this show. We've really been talking about all kinds of different diseases in that, but chronic disease is something that we need to spend a little more time researching in. We're going to talk to you about the root cause. We're going to talk to you about some treatment options, and we're really going to be educating you to take action on what you can do to go back to your doctor or find an integrative practitioner. Hey, I'm Dr. Gez Agolli, founder of Progressive Medical, and your host here on Rethink My Health. I've been doing this for the past 3+ decades. At Progressive, we've been operational helping patients for 27+ years. And we have a fantastic team there of medical doctors, nurse practitioners, naturopathic doctors. We have chiropractor, we have health coaches, dietitian, nutritionists, advocates for you to make an impact on your healthcare. So I want to dive right in right now. Join with me in the studio is Dr. Cheryl Burdette. She is the founder of Precision Point Diagnostics, and she's devoted her life to education. She's director of education at Progressive Medical, and she teaches across the world. Okay, Dr. Burdette, chronic fatigue syndrome. If a patient goes to their regular physician, a lot of times they're going to be maybe running some basic testing, which is fine, CBC, CMP. Let's talk a little bit about those patients that are frustrated. We're not talking about the ones that might have gotten better over a month or so. I want to talk about these patients that are continually battling chronic fatigue. And eventually, after they go to their primary care doctor several times, what ends up happening is that the physician will basically say it's in your head.
Yes.
Okay. And now they'll prescribe them some type of antidepressant, anti-anxiety, SSRI, whatever. So let's put that aside for a second. Let's speak to those individuals right now that are struggling and they don't have answers. What should they do?
They should continue to look for answers because there are very well-researched answers out there. And if they have done basic blood work and they've been told there's nothing there, then they need to look for an integrated practitioner, a functional medicine practitioner, who will help them to read between the lines. And what I mean by that is that even the Journal of Endocrinology, which is the go-to journal in terms of hormone health, where all of the positions get laid out that endocrinologists will follow, even that says that the common reference range, for example, for thyroid, which drives energy, misses half the population. So many times right there in some of the more standard lab work, the answers are there. They're just not being interpreted correctly. And so I think that this is an area where functional medicine really shines because there are a number of things that are very common that cause fatigue that are just completely overlooked. Between thyroid, adrenals, and assessing mitochondrial function, those are very real avenues that will help most people achieve more energy, and they are just not routinely looked at, or they're interpreted incorrectly in a standard office care approach.
Absolutely. And you mentioned hormonal health. I'm so glad you talked about that because I want to list some of the root causes and we're going to jump right into it. You talked about hormones. So what I've listed here, based on research and experience for the past 3 decades, hormonal imbalances, we'll talk about that in a second, thyroid, adrenal, very, very important, that a lot of practitioners don't really determine, and they just do some basic testing. Mitochondrial dysfunction is kind of the new one on the block. It's been around for a while, obviously you learned in medical school, and it's kind of the powerhouse of your cells, the mitochondria, the spark plug. But what's happening is that with this chronic fatigue, it could be complete mitochondrial dysfunction.
Absolutely.
And you're not going to fix that with the medication. You're going to fix that by determining what caused it to dysfunction, which could be an infection. We'll talk about infections in a minute. But nutritional deficiencies are a big one. Okay. So that's the other one. Poor gut health. We had a show a couple weeks ago completely devoted to gut health and leaky gut syndrome. Gut health in itself can exacerbate chronic fatigue.
Yep.
We also know chronic infections are huge, and we're going to talk about infections and toxic overload. We'll also mention that, and poor sleep and chronic stress to kind of working together. So let's just jump into the hormonal imbalances first. Okay, the endocrine system plays a large role in creating cellular energy, ATP.
Yes.
Now, the average patient probably goes to the doctor maybe once or twice a year, and they'll run a basic panel of a TSH, but they won't look at other expanded panels. Let's start off with the thyroid and adrenal. As a functional practitioner yourself for well over 2 decades plus and specialize in diagnostics, what message do you have for patients? What should they be asking their practitioner? What testing should they do? Start off with hormones.
Yeah, well, I really like the initial profile that we do at Progressive Medical, and maybe I've had my hand in helping to develop it, might be part of why I like it, but this is something that is designed to show us fundamental root cause reasons that people could be feeling a drop in quality of life, having more fatigue, maybe more depression, just not feeling like themselves. And so we start with some, what I would call can be seen as some more basic markers, but we use this to then understand understand where we need to go next. So on that initial screen, you would be surprised how many people do have basic lab work. There are things that are out of line and they just don't get even treated. So I've seen plenty of people that are walking around with anemias, their red blood cell count is off and they haven't been told what to do about it. Maybe their vitamin D is low or low normal. That can contribute. They haven't been told what to do about it. And I want to get back to that discussion in terms of adrenals and thyroid. So at Progressive, when we start off, we look to see, are your basic nutrients where they should be? Things like B12 that we know give us more energy, vitamin D that can give us more energy, and we combine that with looking at thyroid, adrenals, and reproductive hormones. Why? Because these are major areas that get overlooked and they help us feel better. Not only do they help us feel better, but they help our systems to function better as well. So I mentioned that the Journal of Endocrinology says the current reference range misses half the population when it comes to thyroid. Major symptom of thyroid, of being low thyroid, is feeling more fatigued. And if you want to put a second symptom there, it's gaining weight easily. So if those things apply to you, you likely have a missed thyroid diagnosis, or that's something that you need to think about. And we need, again, to read between the lines, because you'll need someone to help you with those functional reference ranges, because the Journal of Endocrinology says currently it misses half the population. And I really want to give some attention to the adrenal glands, another part of our hormonal axis. And these are what respond to stress. And when they begin to decline, they're not really looked at in standard of care at all. In standard of care, there's two presumptions about these adrenal glands that make adrenaline, your get up and go hormones that help you respond to stress, get out of bed in the morning, slowly decrease throughout the day so you know when to go to sleep. So having energy and sleeping well, all of that is tied up, and being responsive to stress, all of that is tied up in adrenal function. And it's not measured. So in standard of care, you can either have adrenals all on or all off, and nowhere in between. That's called Cushing's disease or Addison's disease, and they're very serious and should be treated appropriately. However, if you are one step shy from Addison's, which is on the low end of adrenals, low end of adrenaline, then that will be considered normal. Well, this is an organ like any other organ in our body. It works on a spectrum, not all on or all off. Things can rev up and rev down, and that's exactly the point of the adrenals. And so they get worn out when you're under more stress. They get worn out if you've been, had a chronic infection, maybe post-COVID, adrenals can get worn out. So all of these things wear down your adrenals. You don't make adrenaline like you should, and it's just not even looked at all.
It's not even looked at all, because basically traditional doctors in their training are even doing a cortisol blood test, and that's just one level. And obviously that we're looking at the circadian rhythm, which is 4 different samples throughout the day of cortisol, AM, noon, 6 p.m., right before we go to bed. So that's a more comprehensive approach. And you talk about the adrenals. The adrenals are 2 small glands that sit on top of the kidney. It basically helps you handle stress, fight or flight. And you have to have a balance of cortisol. Too much is not good, too little is not good. There's a balance, but it's how your body actually adapts in a stressful situation. And that's really why you have to determine, is your chronic fatigue from adrenal insufficiency or dysfunction? We're not talking about Addison's. That's something that your traditional doctor will pick up. They'll treat you for that. The problem is that they're going to be looking for your therapeutic levels, okay? And the same thing goes to the thyroid. They look at the numbers. You are not a number, okay? Let me be very, very clear. And practicing medicine by the numbers, doctors miss a lot of different symptoms, and there's a lot of ways that you can nourish the thyroid and adrenals without medication. We're not against medication. At Progressive Medical, an integrative doctor uses the combination of both. For those of you that do not know what integrative doctors do, they determine what's best for you. Okay, so now we got the hormones. Dr. Burdette, very, very good on that one. I want to jump a little bit into this mitochondria. There aren't really many tests. Now, there's some autonomic tests. There's something called the TM flow. But there's also nutritional testing and based on symptomatology. So how do we determine what's going on with the mitochondria? And once we determine that, what are some of the best treatments you've seen for the mitochondria? Because I see a lot of patients coming in right now that are suffering from mitochondrial dysfunction?
Yeah, so one marker that we routinely use at Progressive that can tell us about mitochondrial function is something called 8-OH-DG. And this goes up when there's damage to the DNA. And so if you're thinking back to ninth grade cell biology, you're thinking about that nucleus. But recall, or bear with me, remember that the mitochondria also has DNA in it. So there's a lot of good research that says this marker goes up when the mitochondria is failing. So we can tell, we can measure it, and then from there, it's not just academic, we can treat it. And so things that help the mitochondria to function better, some of you might have heard of the nutrient CoQ10, and you might have heard of it being good for heart disease, cardiovascular disease, and you're not wrong, you're right about that. And the reason it's good for heart disease is because it drives the mitochondria. When we think about what does the heart need, it needs constant energy. It can never stop beating. And so this is why CoQ10, yes, is a nutrient for the heart, but specifically for the mitochondria, because the heart has more mitochondria than any other tissue in the body. And so this is one of our go-to mitochondrial therapies. But there's a lot of nutrients. The mitochondria require a lot of nutrition. And so B vitamins and amino acids and CoQ10 and getting levels of glutathione up, all of these things will help mitochondrial function.
Absolutely. And I also want to mention one of the new kids on the block. It's been around for a long time, NAD. Very, very important, NAD. We actually offer it intravenously. So we've seen patients struggling with chronic fatigue, and you could do sub-Q injections of NAD or intravenously, and there are some testing to determine that. But that is also very, very important as a game changer. So we kind of take a look at all the above. At Progressive as well, there's another test that we do. It's called the bioimpedance analysis. And that's looking at something called the phase angle. And the phase angle is so important to determine the health of the cell. For those of you that forgot about cell biology or you weren't really interested in school, just to educate you, the human body has 30 trillion plus cells in the human body. And these cells communicate. And then when there's a dysfunction or oxidative stress or chemicals or deficiencies, that phase angle, which is the health of the cell, a perfect phase angle is broccoli, which is 45 degrees. The average human is between 7 to 10. Once you start getting below that, you become in trouble, okay? And the research is pretty clear on phase angle. And it's a very simple test that we do. You have an impedance and a reactance. You're putting two pads, one inside of your wrist and also on the bottom of your ankle, on the index side. And basically, we're measuring this, the body's electrical beams, and you get a lot of data out of there. You get your body composition. You get your intracellular, extracellular water. So that's a very, very unique test, and a lot of functional practitioners are using it. So if you're listening to Rethink My Health, and if you're in Atlanta, obviously you can visit Progressive Medical. Just go to progressivemedicalcenter.com. Or if you're out of state and you're listening to us, there's a lot of great practitioners across the United States, Institute of Functional Medicine, ACAM, American College of Medicine, AFRM. There's a lot of great doctors and practitioners out there really doing what we're talking about. We want to encourage you, if you're suffering and your general practitioner or internal medical doctor is doing the best they possibly can, and you're not getting any better, we encourage you to think outside the box. We encourage you to think about these different tests. If your doctor said they ran every test on you and they've not done a comprehensive thyroid, more than just a TSH, looking at free T3, free T4, total T3, total T4, looking at the antibodies and also reverse T3. It's very, very important. And if your numbers are still normal, but they're close to high, which is above 4, you're probably subclinically hypothyroid.
Yes.
We were taught that the TSH, right? High is low, low is high. Basically, you want that TSH around 2. But really what you're looking at is T3, because that's the most active form. And T4 converts to T3. And a lot of individuals don't realize this, but T4 is made of diotyrosine plus diotyrosine. What is that? 2 molecules of iodine, and 2 molecules of tyrosine. And T3 is 2 plus 1, it's monotyrosine. So basically, what am I saying? It's made of amino acids and minerals, okay?
Nutrition.
It's nutrition. The human body needs that. This is not just a medication. Now, once again, if the doctor gave you a synthetic T4, that's fine. But you can also use some nutrition and definitely do more extensive. Okay, so we talked about hormones. We talked about mitochondria. I want to get right into this infection. So many doctors and practitioners are missing infections.
Absolutely.
A lot of research, Dr. Bennett, especially viruses. Okay, so let's get right into the infection. Okay, what testing is available to rule out these infections for chronic fatigue?
So that's a tricky one because there's a lot of bugs out there. And by bug, I mean a bacteria or a virus or something that can create a chronic infection. So first, we do want to obviously start with the history. And I want to know, was there more of a sudden onset to the fatigue? Because if there was a sudden onset, that can often be an infection versus a chronic disease where we get worse and worse over the days. So that's an important kind of clue. If you went from really good health to a sudden drop, it's likely that you caught some type of bug, maybe Lyme or even post-COVID. So we'll take the history, we'll find out, were you in the woods or did you have COVID or were your lymph nodes swollen and then you were never the same after that? That is a really good clue. Then from there, we'll look at that same initial screen and we can tell some things from that in terms of your immune system, what your white blood cell count is doing and where you're at. And then we're often going to work on gut-based strategies because that's where 80% of your immune system is. So then from there, as we take more history, as we figure out how you're presenting, maybe you have pain that moves from one area of your body to the other day to day. That is not a standard arthritis. That is typically Lyme disease. Pain does not move from place to place. So if we see that, then we're likely to do a test that would look for Lyme disease as well as what are called various co-infections. In addition to that, maybe we see some things that are off in terms of your hormones. Maybe as a patient, your testosterone is really low and yet you're 32 years old. Well, we know mold can really decrease testosterone. So then we might look for different mold contaminants from there. And so we work with various laboratories out there that can do these panels that will look at the most common infections and help us to understand, is that a reason for your fatigue? And the good news is that's not genetic. That is not just what your body is going to do. We can treat an infection, and we can do that, yes, through various antibiotics or antifungals, but through a lot of more natural IV therapies that are very broad spectrum, used effusively in other countries. And so really capitalizing on some of that research that we see to knock those infections back, because often, like Dr. Agolli said, there absolutely is a root cause for your fatigue. You are not just genes that are expressing this. It is not just something that you have to deal with. There's a reason for it, and it's treatable.
Absolutely treatable. And that's great advice, Dr. Burdette, because doing the testing is very important. If you don't test, you just guess. And I really want to focus more time in this area about chronic infections. Chronic infections can destroy your life. An acute infection, the immune system can handle it. Your immune system, when it's robust, works amazing. You have something called cellular immune system, which is in the cell, and humoral, which is outside the cell, has a memory. And when you do the proper testing with the infectious agents, and I want to focus a little bit on these viruses, because a lot of research on Epstein-Barr, okay? And a lot of patients are exposed to Epstein-Barr and they get a panel done from their doctor and they basically say, oh, it's convalescent and it's IgG. That means that there's nothing you can do about it. What ends up happening though, when your immune system goes low, when you have sleep deprivation, when you have excessive stress, when the body's under attack, guess what happens? The immune system fails you and these old viruses, right, that had been dormant, will affect you. So you really have to do as much as you possibly can, not only to address these infections and to build up your immune system. This is a very unique strategy. And what functional integrative doctors do, in addition to certain medications, and there's not many medications for viruses, but there's a lot of different herbal concoctions, there's a lot of different nutrients, and we can talk about that in a second. Minerals, for example, zinc is so important for T cell count and natural killer cells. With we know that there's some very, very good mushrooms out there, mushroom extracts. But what really we've seen an impact is using these intravenous therapies, especially ozone. We'll talk more about the ozone. And recently, at Progressive, we've added a very unique therapy called EBO, right? What EBO is extravascular blood ozone oxygen. So that's pulling blood out of the vessel, putting it through a very specific tube, and putting ozone and oxygen. So it's very, very powerful, Dr. Burdette.
Absolutely.
But before we even get to that point, basically, there's other things you can do to build up the immune system. There's nutritional protocols. So it has to be a very well-rounded approach. Hey, this is Dr. Gez Agolli on Rethink My Health Radio Show, getting to the root cause, talking about healthcare matters that will help you and your family live a very healthy, vibrant life with energy, right? Energy and vigor, because that's what you need in this very, very challenging time, especially now we're getting up to the holidays. Hey, continue to listen to us. We're talking about chronic fatigue. When we get back after the break, we're going to talk more about root cause testing, specialty testing. We're going to talk about treatment protocols that Dr. Burdette has put together. She's trained thousands of different practitioners on her platform on how to think differently. This is Rethink My Health. Back in a moment. Welcome back to Rethink My Health Radio Show. What an exciting topic. We're talking about chronic fatigue syndrome. It's exciting not because you're suffering about it, it's exciting because we have answers. We have potential therapies and testing. So we talked about the hormones, talked about thyroid and adrenal. So if you're listening to this for the first time, this show is about education, not here to replace your medical practitioner's advice. We're here to educate you to take action. Ask your practitioner to do more extensive testing. Ask your practitioner to evaluate your adrenals. Looking at a full evaluation is critically important. Don't take no for an answer. Keep advocating for yourself. It's so important. If you're not feeling well and you know intuitively something's wrong, you have to go further with the diagnostics. All right, so we got that. We talked about the mitochondria, and now we're right into the infection. To me, this is a big area, Dr. Burdette. So many patients are suffering with infections, not only viruses. You mentioned previously on the break about co-infections. And I want to mention Dr. Richard Horowitz, who is a New York Times best-selling author, and he wrote a book, Why Can't I Get Better? And he talks a lot about that. A lot of doctors and even infectious disease doctors are basically saying, oh, we don't even, I even had a patient one time say to me, the doctor didn't want to do testing because he or she didn't know what to do with it, which is kind of bizarre. I really questioned the patient on that one. It didn't make any sense to me about these extensive co-infections, right? Because they have something called a biofilm. But co-infections are a big problem, all right? So we know that there's certain blood testing, there's certain laboratories, there's IGeneX is one of them, there's another one called MDL that does all of these co-infections. So let's assume right now, patient came back with a co-infection. Obviously, they could be treated with an antibiotic, which sometimes could be appropriate, okay?
Yeah, sometimes.
But sometimes a lot of patients not only destroy their microbiome, and we believe in using antibiotics when necessary, but getting right back to these oxidative strategies, okay? What should a patient do if they got a co-infection?
Well, so the oxidative, so you hear the word oxygen in that, and that's exactly right. So the EBO, like you were talking about, even adds oxygen to it. And so infections don't like oxygen. The mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, really likes oxygen. And so you get a beautiful 1-2 there. Now compare and contrast that with a conventional antibiotic, also great for bacteria, even Lyme disease, or, can be pretty good. Maybe great is an overclaim, but at the same time, toxic to the mitochondria. So we'll see patients who maybe have tried antibiotics for various infections, been on them for a long time, and now they're still fatigued. And we have to figure out, is the fatigue now from the infection or from the toxicity of the antibiotics? So being able to start with what are called oxidative therapies is a real home run for our infectious disease patients, or who are often our chronic fatigue patients. And again, it's treatable. You kill it, it goes away. It's not something you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis anymore. So if we can start people on these oxidative therapies, that's where I love to start, because also, unlike a conventional antibiotic, they're what are called broad spectrum. So what that means is, in this case, it means that it doesn't just kill bacteria, but it can kill a virus, it can kill yeast, it can kill parasites, none of those things like a highly oxygenated environment. And so this is really good, because even Richard Horowitz, who you mentioned, often doesn't refer to it, for example, as Lyme disease. He calls it multi-system infectious disease syndrome, multi-system. And why does he call it that? Because what he says is, and what we see to be true at Progressive is, once you get one infection, it wears your immune system down. And now you become an easy breeding ground for other things to set up shop. And so let's say you have a bacterial infection and some yeast overgrowth, and you give a conventional antibiotic. What happens? It kills the bacteria, but not the yeast. And so the yeast grows more and more. Most women are familiar with this idea, because if they've ever had to use an antibiotic, they know they can get a vaginal yeast infection. And that's one way that occurs. But turns out, men, you're not off the hook. And women, that's not the only place this yeast overgrowth can occur. It can also occur in your GI tract, the gut, or even the sinuses. And so this will lead to more bloating, but it can just straight up lead to more fatigue, even without GI symptoms. So you trade one infection for another. You target this, the other thing grows in its head. It's like another head sprouting up. When you chop off one head, another one grows kind of idea. So oxidative therapies are different. They're broad spectrum. They're able to target really a wide umbrella of infections all at once. We can knock them down. Integrative medicine is different, because we're not just going to treat an infection, we're going to treat the person as well, and we're going to work on your immune system so it doesn't come back. And when you put those two together, it's really, nothing's a magic bullet, but it really is embracing the wisdom of the body to get you back to where you were and to be less worried about a recurrence, because we've not only focused on the bug, but we've focused on the person as well.
Absolutely. That's the key, is focus on the person, not the bug. And I mentioned Dr. Horowitz because he actually came up with, it took years, by the way, and as you mentioned, MSIDS, multi-systemic infectious disease syndrome. He had a very unique questionnaire. So you can go online and get this questionnaire. And if you hit the number, I forget the exact number, it's over 70 or whatever that number is, it'll be in the paperwork. That is a high chance you have a co-infection. Mm-hmm. And you could be spinning your wheels. And don't get me wrong, nutrition is very important. Proper rest is very important. Exercise is very important. If you're not getting better, that's a clear clinical pearl sign that you have a co-infection. Get more testing done. That's the take-home message here. Getting back to the oxidative therapies, I've seen a major difference once we started adding more additional oxidative therapies. We also have something called ozone sauna, where you're sitting in a steam sauna. It's another strategy rather than doing intravenously. And also, of course, infrared sauna is a fantastic strategy for detoxification. So I really encourage you out there. And there's another thing that we also added. It's called the Weber Light photodynamic therapy, where you have very specific bands of light that are going to go into your body intravenously, and they make the infections very permeable. And then whether you're using a medication or a different IV strategy, that will help bust up that biofilm, which is key, because a lot of patients, that's why antibiotics work short term and they stop working, because these infections are pleomorphic, which means what? They change shapes and they can have this biofilm to protect it. So it's a very unique strategy, what we do at Progressive as well. Okay, Dr. Burdette, so getting to the infections, which is critically important, we have listed here as well for chronic fatigue, toxic body burden of environmental toxins, including heavy metals, mold, and other environmental toxicants interfering with cellular function. In your experience, I know that it's multifactorial. How high of this on the spectrum is it for chronic fatigue?
It's way up there. So first of all, toxins and metals in and of themselves will slow down the mitochondria. Second of all, maybe you have some smaller infection that wouldn't rob you of quality of life, but now you get that toxic exposure. It suppresses your immune system. It allows infections to grow. So we can quickly see how these things are multifactorial and they often fit together. When we have someone who's been experiencing chronic, debilitating fatigue for years, and we just want to get that energy level back as quickly as possible, I will push to be able to look at these things together, if at all possible, because if I can know, is there an infection? Are there toxins that are suppressing your immune system? And are your hormones putting the right oil in your engine so that you can rev when we need you to? All of that together is going to fast track better energy and getting well. We don't always have to do it that way. It can be broken into pieces. This is why we work with you over a period of time, not in a 7-minute visit, but expect to come to Progressive, 5 times in a year, because we're really going to be working on each of those layers. And if you think that you're going to address a chronic condition in one visit once ever, that's also part of the problem. You got to think of it more as kind of going to the gym. You're building your health, and that's what we're here to do, to help you build your health. And so if we can look at these things together, we have a multi-pronged approach to get you back to where you were. This is another reason that standard of care often misses the mark, because it's like a pie, and you might be a quarter need of detox and a half need of addressing infections and a quarter need of boosting your immune system. Or you might be 3/4 thyroid with some toxicity in there. Or you might be 90% infections with 10% immunity. But we've got to think about what is your pie, what is your distribution, and address those things and address all of them. So at the end of the day, I'm not looking to see, are you merely infected? Are you merely toxic? Are you merely low in nutrients? I want to know all of those things, because a subclinical nutrient deficiency with subclinical hypothyroidism with an infection that's been lingering could be a debilitating infection, but it's not just one thing. And so that is the flaw of standard of care, is that it's looking for this one bullet, one answer, one solution type of model. And that's just not the reality. We're multifactorial, we're epigenetic. And unless you look at all of these things together, and again, not just a bug, but the person, and how clean is that person? How toxic is that person? What's their diet like? What's their sleep like? What's their lifestyle like? These are all, this is a complete conversation about health. So now I want you to think, if you've gone to your doctor and you've asked about fatigue, did they ask you about your diet, what you're eating? Did they ask you how many minutes of exercise and what type? And if those questions weren't around at all, you have not been completely worked out and worked up, and more importantly, your answers are not completely exhausted. Sometimes just things as basic as dietary change and the right type of exercise, because that's a mitochondrial therapy as well, will be enough to help get you back on your feet.
Right kind of exercise, absolutely. Some individuals out there are over-exercising. And I know it's even hard to believe people say that, but you can over-exercise. It can affect your adrenal function. Once again, that could be going back to the adrenal, how the body responds to cortisol. But for the purpose of this conversation, we've covered quite a bit, actually. We've covered hormones. We've talked about mitochondrial dysfunction. We've talked about nutritional deficiencies, chronic infection, toxic body overload. It seems like a lot, but here's the key. Having chronic fatigue and being debilitated and not living a high quality of life in itself is debilitating and can be overwhelming. And that's why we want to encourage you. If you've been suffering for a long period of time, you've got to do some specialized testing. Now, where do you start? This is a very unique question. You really can't do all of this simultaneously. So from our experience, we have seen over the years thousands and thousands of patients with chronic fatigue. Probably one of the best areas, in our professional opinion, I'll get Dr. Burdette's opinion here, is to always look at hormones and to look at these infections and gut health. you can actually treat those simultaneously. And I'm not saying don't treat heavy metals. You can't do too much. It's too much on the body. But I think it's important to do a deep dive assessment so you can make a decision. Oh my gosh, I have multiple infections. Oh my gosh, my thyroid is just very, very low. I mean, there's certain things you have to look at. So getting a snapshot, right? Looking at a snapshot of the body and then having a skilled practitioner make a determination. Now, most Americans want a quick fix. Most Americans want a drive-through type of healthcare situation. I want to get better today. The reality is that's unrealistic, right? Mm-hmm. So depending how long you've been suffering, this is kind of a rule of thumb. If you've been suffering for a couple of years, it's going to take a little bit of time to get your health back and get your momentum. You need momentum, okay? So foundationally, testing first, clearing out the body burden like a gentle detox, and really focusing on balancing your hormones naturally and focusing on gut health. And if you're dealing with an infection, that's when you get the big guns out. Because once you can clear an infection, the body can begin to heal. It's like that cascade effect. Then you can look at everything else and balance it out. Dr. Ben, I want to get your opinion. That's my opinion, and I know there's many, many ways to approach this. What's your opinion on how to, because we've covered a lot here. I don't want to overwhelm our listeners. I want them to take action because there's hope, right? And to me, you got to start somewhere.
Absolutely. And so at Progressive, we recognize that absolutely it can be multifactorial, but dealing with factor after factor after factor all at the same time can be exactly that, overwhelming. And so this is why we spend a lot of time, we take a history, we figure out which area is most relevant to you, and we start there so it can be manageable, and we work with you through pieces and chunks so that we might start off with more oxidative therapies if we see more infections, and then we come back behind that and work to rebuild adrenals and rebuild thyroid, because those systems do get targeted by infection as well. So this can sound like, oh my gosh, that's just so much to deal with, but we know that, and we know on top of that, you have chronic fatigue. So doing all of these things can just be the straw that broke the camel's back. So we're going to work with you and break it down into pieces that are manageable, diet changes that are manageable, exercise that's manageable, and figure out what's most relevant to you. Start there and then keep working to peel back those layers of the onion. And so often, again, it's not going to be just one thing, but we're going to work towards wellness like you'd go to the gym, building systems up, knocking bugs down, building adrenals, building thyroid, but doing it in a way that's manageable in standard day-to-day life. The point is not to just be a patient within the walls of Progressive. The point is to come there, learn how to build your system back and re-engage with life as a whole.
Absolutely. There is hope. We've seen patients debilitated, and they got their life back. It took a lot of work. It was an investment of time. It was an investment of resources, but they did all the testing. They got a plan of action with a team, because it's all about a team. Wellness is it's a team, okay? And that's so important to figure out what's causing the chronic fatigue. Hey, this is Rethink My Health Radio show, coming to you from Atlanta in our studios, and we are getting to root cause. It's about education. This show is sponsored by Progressive Medical Center. I'm Dr. Gez Agolli. I am the managing director of Progressive Medical, and for the past 27 plus years, we've seen thousands and thousands of patients with chronic fatigue. We've seen so many patients lose hope, and they do the right things and their lives came back. There's no quick fix. There's no panacea. There's no brand new medication out there. Yeah, there's some great discoveries. There's some great supplements. But if you're out there constantly researching and you're trying this thing and that thing and this thing, and you're doing all these multiple supplements and nothing's working, and you've not tested, then you're missing the mark.
100%.
Because is it hormones? Is it gut health? Is it the toxic body burden environments, or is it an infection? This is what you got to find out. Okay, so we covered all that. One of the last things I want to talk to you about, I want to talk to you about sleep, okay? So believe it or not, vitamin S, that's right, I just coined that term. Vitamin S is so vital. Yeah, it's not going to get rid of the infection. It's not going to do nutritional deficiency, but without the proper rest, you can do all these wonderful therapies. And if you don't get that deep sleep where you're getting into the full deep sleep and you get into REM, okay, rapid eye movement, and the body has that restorative sleep, your immune system is going to deteriorate. You're not going to regenerate at the cellular level. Your body, when it's trying to clean up those senescent cells, which are these dead zombie cells, right? It's not going to happen. The body's going to break down. Sleep is critically important. Okay. Dr. Burdette, what's the research showing on sleep with chronic fatigue?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Of course, that can be a cause of being fatigued, and it also has side effects. If you're not sleeping, you're more likely to have larger plaques in your arteries. If you're not sleeping, for example, there's an increased risk of breast cancer in night shift nurse workers because of the lack of sleep. So, and if you're not sleeping, it shuts down something in your brain called the pituitary, and that's what sends all the signals to make those hormones, to make that thyroid, to make that adrenal hormone. So, it's debilitating to not sleep, but we have to ask the question, why aren't you sleeping? And so if you're not sleeping, of course, that can be a reason for fatigue. And yeah, sure, we could talk about melatonin or magnesium, and I sure will and would, and those things are helpful, but ultimately, why aren't you sleeping? So if we go back to the example of, for example, Lyme disease, a reason you might not be sleeping is because the Lyme disease creates a lot of inflammation, in particular, something called IL-6. It's an inflammatory mediator, drives that fire in the body of pathology. Well, that same IL-6 also competes with your melatonin at night, and so it's a reason you don't sleep. So we would reach for different things to help you sleep there, not like valerian or magnesium, but things that would lower IL-6. Or maybe you're not sleeping because of hormonal imbalance. Well, then we need some progesterone to help in that situation. Some people don't treat because of their sleep because of their thyroid, and that might sound weird because thyroid gives you more energy. So what does that have to do with sleep? But it sets that circadian rhythm. And so if you're not sleeping, for sure, there are natural interventions that we can use that will help you to do that initially. But we always want to ask the question, why aren't you sleeping? And when we do that, we have much more specific answers so that you can have a much more restful night's sleep than you might have had just from looking for some things on the internet.
It's really interesting you say that because I totally agree. Also, I want to mention about sleep deprivation, that sleep deprivation contributes to obesity. I know that sounds crazy, but it does. Why? When you are sleep deprived, your body's ghrelin, right? This is a hormone. This is the hunger hormone, just all-time high. Have you ever noticed, if you've not slept properly, that you just have this ravenous appetite?
Yes.
Okay. That is because your hormone ghrelin is being elevated, and that is contributing to overeating. And it does not help with the satiety center, which is part of the hypothalamus. We mentioned the pituitary. The hypothalamus is a bundle of nerves which sends messages to release hormones, okay? So that's all affected. So you basically will just have a ravenous appetite, and it's not just lacking self-control. It's a hormonal mechanism. It's a receptor in the body because of what's happening physiologically. So it's all in balance. It's called homeostasis. When everything's in balance internally, the body can function optimally, okay? So that's why we look at all of the above. Hey, this is Rethink My Health. What a great show on education. I hope this show has inspired you to think outside the box about chronic fatigue. There is hope. Don't lose hope. It's one step at a time. Dr. Burdette, we're coming to the tail end of the show. We covered quite a bit here with hormones. We've covered gut health, mitochondrial dysfunction. Just quickly about mitochondrial dysfunction. When you mentioned CoQ10, I did a lot of studies about CoQ10 25 years ago, actually. And I actually said if I only had one supplement, only one supplement, it would be CoQ10. I still think that, but I'm more leaning towards probiotics, prebiotics, but that's okay.
And you're one of the most high energy people I know, so
yes.
I think that CoQ10's doing you well, as is the probiotic.
I had 200 milligrams before I got onto the show, of course. But yes, CoQ10 is so important. Also, we talked about the toxic body burden, chronic infections, and of course, vitamin S, sleep.
Yeah.
Dr. Burdette, any last words of encouragement for our listeners?
There are just so many stones to turn, and there are so many answers out there. Chronic fatigue is not something that you are stuck with, that you have to live in place with. It's just something that hasn't been worked up for you yet. And so come work with a team that understands how I talked about to read between the lines, some of the standard lab work that can just miss things if we're not doing it right. You think maybe I've had a thyroid test. I want you to go back and find that. Go to your portal. Did you only have a TSH and T4? Because as Dr. Agolli talked about, T3 is the most active thyroid hormone. So did you get the right workup? Was it interpreted correctly? Has anybody even ever looked at cortisol in you? That's the major hormone that comes from the adrenals, and they should have done that in your saliva 4 times throughout the day. Has that been done? Have they asked you questions about what you're eating and how you're exercising? And if your answer, and has anybody done any kind of workup to look at your nutrient levels? And if the answer is not really and no, and I don't think so, then I can guarantee you there are a lot of things that can help you feel better. And yes, as Dr. Agolli said, some work involved, but anything worth it requires work. Isn't that what you want, to know why this is happening and be able to address it largely on your own because you've been empowered with those tools to do so?
Thank you, Dr. Burdette. Words of wisdom from Dr. Cheryl Burdette. Thank you so much. And don't lose hope. Think outside the box. Take one step at a time. A journey begins with that one step. I know this sounds like a lot, but believe me, your health is worth it. If you know anybody that's suffering chronic fatigue, share this radio show with them. We're going to be here next week again talking about chronic diseases, thinking outside the box. There is no box here at Rethink My Health. I'm Dr. Gez Agolli here on Rethink My Health radio show. God bless you guys, and we're so excited to be here educating you here in our studios. And remember, a cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries the bones. Don't be crushed, be energetic, and there's hope. God bless you guys, and see you next week on Rethink My Health.